Hello, welcome to another episode of Dr. Maisha. And I want to talk about something today that actually I really love to talk about, which is values. Now, any person who's listening who has hung around me long enough, who knows me, who's followed me, who's heard me speak, knows that I love to talk about values. And here's why. Values are a person's values. And when I talk about values, I'm talking about the deepest of the core values. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. But values are something that motivate us at the deepest level. Values are behind beliefs, values are behind attitudes, values are behind our actions. And values are given by many things. So they're given by our upbringing, they're given by our past experience, they're given by our culture, they're given by the things that our parents, our teachers, and even our friends and society has installed. And I think that a lot of times when people think about like their core values, like the deepest part of what's important to them, they think that that doesn't really change over time, but in actuality, it can. As we grow, as we develop ourselves, as we like engage in personal development, as we expand our social circles, our community circles, our values can expand and they can actually change. But what I think is most important to take away from today as we move through this is that as we interact with each other, much of the interaction much of the interactions, much of the listening and the decisions are coming from these deep core values. And much of what motivates us to speak, to do, to act the way we do is coming from these deeper core values. And they get formed early in life, in our formative years. And so I want to talk today a little bit about how do you elicit someone's values? What are they, first of all? And then how do you begin to elicit someone's values and what context does this apply? Now, you might see the title in your organization and your communities, but this also applies in families. If you're a parent, if you're a sibling, if you're a child of a parent, then speaking into someone's values and listening for their values can be extremely valuable in motivating them and empowering them and even getting what you need out of that interaction or out of that relationship. And in fact, getting being heard as well. So let's talk about it. Let's just start with what do I when I talk about values? When I talk about values, it's very simple. What is important to you? And it's not just what's important to you at the surface level. And there are surface values, like there's surface values, and then there's those deep core values. So at the surface and in the moment, maybe finance is important to you, maybe getting a promotion, maybe losing pounds, whatever it is. There could be like some surface values. But then there are the deeper values, the thing that drives you. What is the thing that drives you wanting to earn more? What is the thing that drives you wanting to weigh less? Or what is the thing that drives you to want to move up in an organization? And those are those deeper core values. And those are usually, they are one word, one or two words if we were to verbalize them. So maybe a core value is integrity, or maybe a core value is legacy or contribution. These are the things that drive and motivate us at the deepest core level. Maybe what's important is stability. Maybe wealth is important, but even wealth can be more of a surface value that is more about legacy and more about contribution. So there's love could be a deep value. Family can be a deep value, a core value. So these are the types of things that are at our core that drive us, that drive the surface values, that drive sort of our actions and the things that we do. And even in organizations, understanding those core values and understanding what makes up those values can actually lead to increased motivation, increased engagement amongst your peers and your leadership and your employees. Because guess what? There's a saying, people don't care about how much you know until they know about how much you care. And when you're speaking into the values of people, then number one, they get how much you care, but also when you're speaking into their values, you're speaking into what motivates them. So the only question you ask is what's important to you. Now, here's the thing though. A lot of times people will say what's important to you and they'll give you their surface values. But why is it important to you? That's going to get at the deeper level of the values. And I was talking to a leader in an organization that I work with, and we were talking about this idea of getting what's important to their a particular group of people who are not engaging at the level that they wanted. And the question is, what's important to you? And if you interview enough, and so this is when you're talking about communities and organization, this is important because there are values at the level of the individual, and then there are values at the level of family, there are values at the level of group, there are values at the level of community, organization, all of those types of things. And so if you how you get a sense, because you may not be able to play into the individual values of everyone if you're talking about a community or an organization, but if you interview enough people, what will happen is or if you have enough of a discussion, then what you'll find is you'll begin to access the community values or the collective values. And what's important about that is that in a particular context, and this is also important, values can be contextual. They can be contextual. And so values can be different in different contexts, what's important to a person. And a lot of times, even the values that are maybe different in different contexts will have crossover in like overall for a person. They'll be cross contextualized, the deepest of the deep value, the values of a group of people. Having this communication is everything. Having a round table, having discussions and listening. And I always talk about the level of listening and how you listen for someone's values. But when you begin to interview people, when you begin to have those discussions, and not just one, but ongoing discussions, and how you have these ongoing transparent discussions is to have a culture of safety where people feel like they actually can be transparent and honest about what's important to them and it not be leveraged against them, it not be used against them. But to be able to ask a collective group of people, you will start to see themes, values, and then as a leader, as an organization, as a community leader, you can begin to look at, well, what then would fulfill that? And how can I speak into those values in order to make the difference that we want to make in order to engage and make a difference for the bigger whole? Okay. So the question is, what's important to you? And I'm going to talk about this in the context of organizations, but then I'm going to pan it down. I'm going to chunk it all the way down to the level of families and individuals. So I think it's important to talk about that as well. So the question is, what's important to you? But then the next question is why? Why is that important to you? And that will tap into the deeper value or the deeper importance of that at hand. Now, even after the person has shared their first why it's important to you, then guess what? You go a little deeper with why is that important to you? And what happens is the more you ask, and sometimes we're shy of asking because we feel like we're getting in someone's business. And you can pre-frame that with, I really just want to know what's important to you so that I can make the biggest difference that I can. So when you continue to ask why, eventually you'll get to a point where they'll say, oh, well, it's that. It's just because, right? So if you were to ask what's important to me in the context of what I do in my career, and because I've done this work, sometimes I go a little bit deeper, a little bit quicker, but I would say really for me, what's important to me is to make a difference, right? To be the biggest contribution that I can to leave a mark on this world and to leave this world better than when I came in it. And then if you were to ask me why that's important to me, what I would say, I have a son and my son has friends and I have nieces and nephews. And the thought of them being in a world that's safe, the thought of them having the autonomy to be able to express themselves fully, to be able to do the things that they enjoy, to be able to know that they're self sufficient, and to be able to pass that knowledge down. So then for me, that's legacy. That is legacy. And so why do I want to leave this world a better place? Why is it is contribution? It's because guess what? I want to leave that legacy. Another thing that's very important to me is family. So why is what's important to me about my career is this free is time is having the time and the autonomy and the freedom to be able to spend time with my family the way I when I want to spend the time with them, to be able to get to them when I need to get to them. I'm getting older, my parents are getting older, and I'm still a mom. So to be able to be mobile and have that freedom, so freedom is a big value for me. And it's time freedom, it's autonomy, it's all of those things. And so when you start to get with your, if you have a team, if you have your employees, if you have your colleagues, if you're a person who is speaking to a leader and you're wanting to speak into that listening, you got to know what's important to them. And if we were to chunk that down, if we were to chunk that down and let's say talk about it from the standpoint of family, of friends, of inner circles, of spouse and partners, it's just as important. And I think as a parent, it could be an unpopular opinion, but it's something that I was never asked as a child and something that I listen for because I think in children younger than a certain age, it may be difficult to articulate that, but to really listen for what's important to your children, because let's face it, we want to motivate our children to be the best people they want, little people they want to be, to engage in a particular way, and to be motivated in their studies, and to be motivated in learning about maybe finances, to be motivated in maybe staying well, their physical well-being, their emotional mental health. And so we have to listen for, and it changes throughout the phases of development, just like it changes for us throughout our phases of development. What was important to me 10 years ago, before my son was born, was different from what's important to me now. So that those values, they shifted, they changed, evolved, and we have to leave room for those things. And so for our children, for the young people, and especially, and I say for our children, but I'm going to even expand this out to children and young people, young adults even. What's important to a child at 10 is different than what's going to be important to them at 16. And what's important to a 16-year-old will be different than what's important to a 22-year-old. And then you have a young adult, and they may have a certain mindset. And so as we think about our families, as we think about our communities, and we want to make a difference with them in a particular way, if you want to make a difference with them, you still have to know what's important to them rather than pushing our own agenda, which is oftentimes what parents do, what employers do, what team leaders do, what society does, employs their own agenda. Rather than doing that, listening for what is the agenda, or what's of importance to the person that you're interacting with. And even in business, and even as you network with different people, if you just focus on asking that one question, what's important to you and why? It's so simple, right? What's important to you and why? And then listening, you might find that there are common values. And oftentimes, and it's important to look for those common values. Oftentimes we look for differences. We look for what's that binary, and I've talked about that before. We look for my values are this and their values are that. But where are the common values? Listen for the common values. And then from there, you can individuate what works for one person versus another. But if you chunk up to the common value, then you can negotiate the rest. And I think that is what often gets missed in us coming to a workable solution for all people involved, is because guess what? No one is really thinking about what is important to anyone else except themselves. And our societal system is set up to ignore what's important for whole groups of people. But then we have to keep remembering that the system is made up of people. And so when enough of us begin to think about this in a very different way, think in a very different way, and especially those who tend to be in positions of power, begin to think about this in a different way, then we can actually begin to make a shift more globally. And I chunked that all the way up after getting very specific with it. But the bottom line is, what's going to move people is really hearing them. People want to be heard. People want to be acknowledged, understood, and valued and respected. And that goes for the individual, and it goes for groups and cultures of people. And we can't move forward if there's not some reciprocity of respect, because right now there's a lot of unreciprocated there's a lot of unreciprocated and unheard people and unreciprocated respect and consideration, let's put it that way. And so if we want to our move things forward in our culture, then we really need to start thinking differently as a whole, as a system. And so, with that, I will bring it back to the question that can be asked, and understanding that the question, people really want to be heard, and they want to be seen, they want to be valued, and they want to be respected. And all you have to do is ask them what's important to you and why. And what inside of that, what you'll probably find is that there is a common value there, and you can work it down from there. That's all that I have for today. And of course, I like to leave you with a little action item. And today's action reflection and I'll say for the week, I say today, but I'm going to say this week, is to go and ask the people around you. Start with your inner circle. But if you're a leader, especially if you're a leader in an organization, or if you're in an organization, I would go even ask a leader, what's important to you and why? And just listen and see if you can find the common value. That's going to be your challenge. Find the common values among people who are like you, and for those who may be of occupied different identities. And when you start to find the common values, also acknowledge and celebrate the individuation as well, and look at how can the common values help to bring collaboration inside of the individual beliefs that they carry. All right. So that's your action item for this week. And you can do that whether you're an organizational leader, whether you're a parent, whether you're a spouse, a partner, whether you're a sibling, whether you're a daughter, son, or non-binary child of a parent, whether you're whatever the case may be, you can find a common value there. All right. Or you can do that challenge, I should say. So that's it for today. You all have a wonderful rest of the day, rest of the week. And do me a favor, share this episode, share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, share it with a family member. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed and leave a review to let the people know behind you that this is a podcast that's making a difference. So, with that, I'll leave you and say, have an amazing day, have an amazing week. And until we see each other again, stay empowered.